All right, we have Fernando Ribiero, we have Will Martino, and we have Yorke Rhodes on the line. It's great to see you all. I know Fernando and Yorke better than Will, but I got a chance to catch up with Will this morning, and I've been cyber stalking him for the last 24 hours or so, and quite interested to hear about Kadena and everything you have to say about that. Actually looked quite interesting to me. Yorke from Microsoft and Fernando from Oracle, two names that we've heard of before. Why don't you guys give a quick introduction? We'll go kind of clockwise. Fernando, why don't you go first, and we'll go to Will, then Yorke.
Sure. So I'm principal solution architect for key accounts here in Latin America. I'm talking to you from São Paulo, Brazil, and I've been involved in blockchain projects all over the place, especially here in Brazil and in Chile. And as the Chainlink community knows, I've been very excited about Chainlink for a long time. I've been working with the project for a long time, and I'm very excited to be here again, Joe.
Thanks, Fernando. Will?
Yeah, so I am Will Martino, co-founder and CEO of Kadena. I got my start in crypto at the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is actually where I also learned the importance in production of really good reference data. Pulling in the Bloomberg Data API for working on cases was very important. We helped to put that into place, and I was there when Valerie founded the cryptocurrency working group and was their tech lead when she founded the group. Left, went to JP Morgan, ended up as a lead engineer for their first blockchain called Juno, got open sourced. It was basically JP Morgan Coin version 0, and then ended up leaving with my co-founder that I met at JP Morgan and founding Kadena 4 years ago. Kadena is a hybrid blockchain platform. Most famously, most recently, we just not only launched our sharded proof of work mainnet, but we actually scaled it up in production, which makes us both the first people to launch state sharding into production, but also to actually scale it up in production. We went from 10 to 20 chains without needing any additional hash power. It went so seamlessly that it didn't make any news after the announcement that happened, because there were no bugs. It's actually amazing. They're upgrading a global production system and having no problems. And on the enterprise side, we've been working on enterprise stuff since we left JP Morgan. Healthcare, supply chain. Really, we believe in smart contracts being the place where the rubber meets the road for enterprises, and that it's smart contracts that are going to lead the way for the process automation for business-to-business contacts that we're going to be seeing throughout this decade.
Well, you broke the first rule of publicity there, Will. You need to screw up to get the free press. That's important. So
we're learning this lesson.
Yorke, on to you.
Great. Great to be here, John. Thanks for putting this together. Happy to be chatting with my Chainlink folks. I actually started in the space in 2015 on my personal journey of discovery of new innovative technologies, and met a colleague, Marley Gray, in 2015. We got together and decided that this was very much like an internet moment, and that we wanted to ensure that Microsoft was paying attention this time. Not like 1990, early 90s, when I was also at Microsoft, and we had some bobbles and missteps around understanding the implications of internet technologies. So we basically took the company through a journey over the last 5 years, both in development tools, in participation in the open source communities, across ledgers, really understanding that, like base level internet technologies, there would be a lot of different choices to make, right, in the early days, and help people, sort of navigate their decision making around those choices, provide choice from a platform perspective, and as a cloud provider primarily, make sure that we have a platform that's accessible to many different types of organizations, both at the base layer as well as fully up the stack as the market matures. So for our own portfolio, we basically focused on how do we add value to open source stacks, very similar to what we did in a database world with things like Azure MySQL, Azure SQL, Azure Postgres. These are all managed service offerings for databases. And then how do we think about the enterprise and the problems that enterprises have and making open source technology accessible to enterprise, with things like enterprise permissioning, for example, right? And so, as we have progressed, we've also spent a great deal of time with developer tooling. We have a little tool called VS Code and Visual Studio, which has about 12 million developers. And so making blockchain development accessible to those developers was a key important part of our journey. We actually shipped our first product in that space in April or March 2016, so very, very early. And so, we're continuing to follow the new protocols, new encryption standards in the market, make sure that our cloud offerings actually support those, and working very closely with many organizations in the space. So great to be here, John. Thank you. And thank you for this.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't get it. Somebody just made it because apparently Baseline has a lot of fans out there. I just sent it along. And I have to say, Yorke, I never thought as an old IBMer that I'd be such a big fan of Microsoft. But I am looking at you at on a Surface Studio, and it is my prized possession because it can do that. And it is the most beautiful piece of equipment I've ever owned.
Yeah, the Surface line is quite amazing. Not to make an announcement, but I don't know if you guys have seen the new Surface Duo, which is an double, sort of two-screen foldable Android device that we collaborated on the Android parts of that with Google. I mean, it's a different company, John.
I know, Panos Panay.
Very different, yeah.
Hero. And by the way, I sent you that mug so you would send me a Duo, but that's the topic of this conversation is about the enterprise and how can we start what actually, in a way, it's a misnomer. It's the wrong statement. It's not how we start the conversation. The conversation's already been started for about 5 years, but it's gone in fits and starts, not to use the word start again. So where are we now? Let's talk about where are we now and how are we going to really crank this engine over and have enterprise be the new driver. I mean, everybody's talking about DeFi. Let's talk about how enterprise is going to be using the blockchain so much that that's the next thing that we have to worry about. Yorke, you've discussed where you've gone with the blockchain journey. You guys, like myself, you're sort of a scout. There's pioneers, there's settlers, and there's scouts. Mm-hmm. And you're a scout, right? You figured out that there was gold in their hills with blockchain, and you convinced the company to go forward. Today, it's growing beyond you, right? It's not just in Microsoft, the cool kids with the blockchain stuff. It's in SQL. It's in in Dynamics. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there's definitely really sort of three pillars. I talked about the product pillar of our work in blockchain. There's also, to your point, recognition in non-blockchain products that there could be value in this type of technology. So I have colleagues who are doing investigations, obviously, in the database team. Folks in the Dynamics team doing investigations. These are very, very early investigations. There's no commitment to do anything. There's just, effectively the research, right? Beyond after the scout comes the research, right? It's there. Those are definitely early. We do have one very public production application that the businesses use. That's a third pillar. So how does the different business lines take advantage of the technology? So Xbox Royalties, which is basically a little gaming platform called Xbox, has a lot of game publishers. The game publishers and Xbox, there's a royalties exchange, right? A royalties payment for the game publishers using the IP, right, on the platform, right? So typical usage-based royalties, and so there's some challenges essentially around how that payment process has worked. So they've done some early work in leveraging blockchain technology. This is actually a public reference. It's on our website. So that is the most public project that we've done on a business line. We also have a number of different areas of non-public work looking at supply chain as a great use case for verifiable provenance, right, of goods as well. And then there's been, I would say, long investigations around the capabilities of blockchain in social justice and human rights, and because of verifiable traceability, things like conflict minerals, which some partners in the space that we know well are already doing work in that area. One other early area that we started actually incubating in 2016 was identity, based on a distributed public key infrastructure called public blockchain, essentially, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin or other public blockchains, as a root of trust that is essentially a certificate that you as a person can hold. And so we did an early bit of work with ID 2020, which is an organization specifically focused on digital identity as a human right, very focused on how to take that technology to market. And so that informed the work that we're doing in the identity space. And so the other, place where blockchain technology shows up in a big way is in the identity engineering team. So we've got a number of public announcements we've made over the last couple of years around supporting decentralized identities, working with verifiable claims as new ways of authentication into enterprise systems. And that's actually pretty exciting because the work is actually fairly mature at this point. And they've publicly spoken about everything that I've said in terms of the identity work. They've also spoken about using the Microsoft Authenticator app as a place to verify claims, right? And essentially sort of morphing the Authenticator app into a wallet that can hold DIDs and claims. So there's a lot of exciting work going on there.
That's great, Yorke. And by the way, if you can't send me a Duo, you can send me a new Xbox. That'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. Yeah.
Fernando, let's go to you. So,
we don't have a gaming platform, so I can really say Xbox and not get in trouble. So.
And by the way, I want to make sure we have plenty of room for Will. He's got a lot to talk about with Kadena, and actually, I've gotten quite interested in what he's had to say. I have to say, in my cyber stalking, what people were saying about Kadena was, I don't know if they're going to win or lose, but they've got a hell of a good team and some fantastic engineers.
Nice.
But we'll get to you in a minute. Will, let's talk about Oracle. Fernando, I remember saying to one of your executives a couple of years ago that as blockchain goes from just this inaccurate, and I have to say I'm partly responsible for this inaccurate idea that it's a fancy database to it's a fancy middleware for applications. Oracle learned, way back in the early days of relational databases, which, by the way, go look up relational databases. Look who invented it, and then look at the company that he worked for and what they did. It was very similar to what happened with is happening with blockchain today. They kind of applied relational to more traditional or earlier databases and slapped the label on top of it. So Oracle, understands this idea that it's not about the database, it's about the applications, and you guys have really been good at that. So how is this next wave of enterprise adoption of blockchain going to really advantage Oracle?
Yeah, well, and so Yorke mentioned quite a few things. I think I can probably comment on the same things that he did, and then you can understand where Oracle is in that game. So, as you know, we have this cloud infrastructure business, and we offer blockchain as a service like everybody else. But we also have, as you mentioned, this cloud applications business.
J.D. Edwards.
We have ERP, CRM, SCM, supply chain, and we have a little bit of everything, right? Especially when I was in the startup program, I used to tell startups, don't worry about competing with Oracle, because if you know the portfolio, well enough, everybody competes with us, right? In something, right? Because there's software all over the place. just like in Microsoft, all these different groups have been exploring blockchain, right? So, but I think we, and then in addition to blockchain as a service, we launched a blockchain native cloud application called Intelligent Track and Trace, right? So Yorke was saying that they are looking into supply chain. We did the same, and we already launched this first, blockchain native cloud application based on our own blockchain as a service. So Oracle has been really.
If you don't mind me interrupting, did you draw on? I mean, it's about understanding what the data schema ought to be, right? It's about knowing workflows.
Yeah.
Did you draw from your experience on that in those projects?
Yeah. Well, so we So let me say we probably should be doing more with that already. But what is actually happening is you have, and we are doing the same thing with AI. We are adding AI to the SaaS application. So rather than have what we have today, which is a standalone blockchain application, we're looking at adding blockchain to everything. But I think that's going to take a long time, right? As you know, enterprises are very slow, right? So even though people have been asking for this, I don't think they have been asking enough already, right? So I don't really see that going very, very fast, right? I know it's happening. I see the talks, I attend the meetings, but I don't really see that as a major priority yet, right? But that's certainly happening, right? Just like we're doing with AI, we're going to add a little bit of blockchain to everything in the SaaS portfolio. So we're going to have blockchain for retail, blockchain for ERP, blockchain for CRM. But for now, we're really only focusing on this, one standalone blockchain native application that we have, and the blockchain as a service thing, which we have, which, by the way, everybody has, right?
I mean, as long as everybody's following the same rules, and that's where I think Oracle can really be powerful. Is you get more thinking on how
we will, but as you know, it's all based on customer push, right? But again, I've been attending more meetings about blockchain than ever before. I mean, last year when I gave my first Chainlink talk, I mean, I was very surprised to see how many Oracle people from all over Oracle got in touch with me. I was very surprised. I mean, people from all over the place, right, who are either Chainlink developers or Chainlink investors, right?
Yep.
Token holders. They all got in touch with me. I was very surprised. I had no idea that there were so many of us out there, right? And everybody got in touch, started telling about what they're doing. It's all very exciting. But again, for products, right? I think it's going to take a little longer, right? Just like Yorke mentioned with Microsoft, it's just going to take a little longer, but it's certainly happening.
And speaking of being surprised, let's talk. We're going to move to Will, and I want to give him plenty of time here. I was really surprised by the progress of Kadena. I'll admit I haven't been tracking it. I'm going to be looking at a lot more going forward. Will, and let's. I wonder if you could talk about how Kadena works, but also how it interoperates with something like smart contracts. Or not smart contracts, oracles like Chainlink, and how I would work with Chainlink and Kadena.
Sure. So the basics of how Kadena works is that we are a full stack platform for blockchain applications. This means that we have a public blockchain, a private blockchain, and a smart contracts language that runs on top of both. This language is called PACT, P-A-C-T. It's designed with a lot of the lessons learned from Ethereum. When my co-founder and I got our start in blockchain at JP Morgan, one of the first things we did was we built our own blockchain, which became Juno, but also our own EVM, and learned a lot of the shortcomings of what the EVM has to offer when it comes to enterprise uses. We used to joke, actually, we still do, that if we had walked into a business line at JP Morgan and said, in earnest, if there's a problem with one of the contracts, we're going to have to hard fork the network to upgrade it, then we would have gotten laughed out of the room and fired, or both, maybe at the same time. Like the idea that you have to upgrade all your software just because there's a bug in one little tiny piece that only affects you, not the broader network, Yeah, kind of a non-starter. So we learned a lot of lessons from working with the EVM and building our own blockchain and put all of them into Pact. So Pact is designed from the point of view of in 2030, blockchain is fully adopted, but it's adopted like the internet, which is that we all use it regularly in apps on our phones and apps on our computers all the time, but we don't really realize that it's there that much. It's much more seamless. Like you don't know what TCP, most people don't know what TCP is, even though we all use it all the freaking time. Like probably every 5 seconds, you're probably using TCP in some way, shape, or form. So we looked at smart contracts and said, look, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is what needs to be right. What are we going to need in 2030? And then we drew that back to, okay, what do we need to build today? Because these things, as we've seen with the EVM and Solidity, are notoriously hard to upgrade once they're in production. The EVM has gone through very little upgrades over the last 5-6 years. And so is Ethereum 1.0. It's very unfortunate, but it's also just the reality that you really need to nail. It's kind of like manufacturing, where there isn't as much of a first mover advantage because that supply chain takes so long to build up and to modify and to iterate on that oftentimes, in manufacturing, a second mover can really make headway because they can look at the mistakes of the first mover who actually proved out the market. So that's kind of how we look at it. So like, lawyers and executives, for example, should be able to read, if not write, smart contracts. You shouldn't have to have a PhD or be an extremely seasoned developer to be able to at least read one. So that's where Pact comes from.
I can use a Chainlink so I would use Pact to write a script that would pull say a Chainlink oracle, and then you have 20 blockchains effectively kind of braided together, but you're not having to spray that across all 20 blockchains and you get this big non-determinism issue. It's still on one. You have to choose. How actually do you do that? Do you choose one blockchain?
The same way you choose using Ethereum or Bitcoin, or Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, or Ethereum and Ethereum testnet. You specify the transaction.
Right? So I don't have to choose a shard. It's one big chain. So in your
case, you pick which shard you want your account to live on. So what it allows for is also having applications that can actually scale horizontally in production on the public. This is a public network, for the record. We also have our private chain, which can then link to the public network. So it's our layer 2. You can think of it kind of like a hub and spoke model, except that the hub is very high throughput, which is where we talk about hybrid. Where you're going to have part of the application logic live in the public, part live on the private. But the gist of it is that you have your account on one chain.
Right. I like how you put this. I want to, in the time we have left, is just to kind of tie this back up. You could use an Oracle database for your secure, private, confidential corporate data. You would maybe you could then take your private permissioned Kadena blockchain part and put synthetic data on that, and then use your public network as your anchoring and ordering and kind of flow control. Is that kind of it?
Yep. You could also use Baseline for that middle layer if you wanted to. The main thing that we offer is that our public network is scaled, and we have 20 chains. And once we start to see throughput become a problem and congestion become a problem on the network, we can upgrade it to be 50 chains or 100 chains, 50 shards or 100 shards. It's sharding that makes sense and works. The best way to visualize it is to just go to explorer.chainweb.com and just look at it for a couple minutes. It's proof of work, but there isn't just one chain. There's more than one. But the energy use and the hash rate is the same as it would be if it was just one chain. It's
quite interesting.
Full the same production.
That's our time. We're here all week. Yorke, I wanted to get back to you with one last one, but I'm afraid time right now. But we love you. Andy, it's back to you. Thanks a lot.